Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, yes? Can you hear me? Hello?
Mhm.
Okay, all right.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning, maybe this afternoon. Thank you to Camilla Moore, chairperson of this task force, and her fellow committee members. Special thank you to the Secretary of State, Shirley Weber, for her leadership. I am honored to be called to speak before this groundbreaking, history-making committee. I applaud your efforts. Um, I am also the president and chair of the board of the National Society of Sons and Daughters of the United States Middle Passage, the first lineage society specifically for descendants of enslaved people born in this country. We have close to 100 members who, in order to join the organization, they had to successfully trace themselves to someone who was enslaved under the system of inhumane U.S. chattel slavery, where millions of individuals over many generations lost their freedoms and suffered cruelties, both documented and beyond imagination. We celebrate our ancestors' triumphs over the extreme adversity and their contributions to our country and the world. Organization was founded in 2013, and its mission is to connect members, commemorate our ancestors, educate the world about the ills of U.S. chattel slavery and its continued effect, and we also want to educate people about the resilience of our ancestors. We hope to bring healing through truth and stand as a reminder to never again allow any groups of people to be treated in this manner. Next slide. You can go one more slide. The organization does not have an official stance on reparations. However, we are currently studying it. Speaking for myself as a descendant of over 30 enslaved people, I offer my full support for reparations because it's the most meaningful way to bring a measure of justice for the atrocities committed and to close the this trillions of dollars wealth gap, and to bring healing and honor to our nation. And I am sure many of our fellow members feel exactly the same way. Next slide. My purpose here is to tell the committee that it is absolutely possible to trace one's lineage to individuals who were enslaved in the United States. For the vast majority of African Americans, it is relatively easy when you use the negative evidence in a proof argument to state the enslavement status of an ancestor. Negative evidence is the inference one can draw from the absence of what should exist under certain conditions. And I will present some ideas later on about more efficient ways to identify enslaved ancestors. I'll walk you through the process using my own family. Next slide. So step one, you want to find your parents and their parents on the most recent census by going back census by census until you find the situation. Thankfully, the Census Bureau will be publishing the 1950 census in just a few days. For me, my father, Irvin Anderton, was living with his parents, Boston Lincoln and Irene Anderton, in Blount County, Aniana, Alabama, on the 1940 census. Next slide. For the next step you need to do is to find your grandparents living with their parents, your great-grandparents. If you don't know who they are, you can find them in many sources, including death certificates. This happens to be my grandfather's death certificate. Next slide. I then continue to go back through each census until at the time I find my grandfather living with his parents on the 1910 census, where I found him living there. Please note his race, age, birth dates, birthplaces, and of these ancestors. On the 1910 census, My great-grandfather, William, was age 48, and my great-grandmother, Easter, was born, had her age was 57, excuse me. If you do the math, she was born in 1852. Next slide. And on the next slide, we see this very key piece of negative evidence. This is an Alabama law passed in 1832, virtually eliminating its free people of color by threatening to torture and re-enslave them if they didn't leave. So anyone in Alabama after February 1, 1833, but before December 1865, was most likely enslaved because free people of color were forced to leave. If her mother was free at her birth, Easter would not have been born in Alabama. Another form of negative evidence supporting enslavement is the absence of qualifying ancestors on the 1850 and the 1860 non-slave census, since enslaved people would have been listed. Next slide. Using the genealogical proof standards, I can stop here because I have critically tested relevant evidence through a process of analysis and correlation to show that my ancestor, Easter Staten Anderson, my great-grandmother, was more than likely enslaved. Her race is identified as Black. Generally, only people identified as Black, Indian, or mulatto were enslaved. She was born in Alabama in 1852, between 1833 and 1865. Her mother was born in Alabama as well and was most likely enslaved, since she too resided in Alabama in the effective dates of the law. Many slave states had this similar law. Also, I did not find Easter Staten nor her parents enumerated as free on the 1850 or the 1860 census. So I believe I have successfully proven that my ancestors were enslaved in just a few steps using negative and other evidence. But for membership in Sons and Daughters, we ask people to go a bit further to get more detailed information because we want their stories to be told. In this particular case, my uncle, who actually saw and heard Easter Staten speak about her enslavement, he's still alive today, and he's seen her with his own two eyes. I also traced Easter Staten's mother to which would be my second great-grandmother, to a will of the enslaver. She was only 8 years old and listed as inventory just above the hogs and the furniture. Very devastating to see that. The same use of negative energy can be used for, yes.
You have a minute and a half.
Okay, I'm okay. Next slide. Okay, so in conclusion, finding evidence of enslavement is fairly easy to do using this process. It's a powerful, simple, and it's a great tool when positive evidence like bills of sales, inventory lists, deeds are difficult to obtain. Additionally, to add to the power of negative evidence, I'm proposing a creation of a database of free Black immigrants and their descendants arriving between 1808 and 1865, according to the 1850 and 1860 censuses. Less than 10,000 people actually immigrated voluntarily to the United States. If an ancestor was born before the end of chattel slavery, they would be listed. They would not be on this list, and we can use this as negative evidence. In addition, I would like to also propose that the government prepare a database of enslaved people and use reverse genealogy to connect those enslaved people with their descendants. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you, and I look forward to your questions.